Welcome, everyone. I'll continue to say hello to our participants as they arrive tonight, for our attendees for this presentation. My colleague, Professor Carlin, and I are going to talk about some basic essentials of legal research. And of course, we're going to spend most of our time with you tonight on Bluebook citation. We'll probably be together for the greater part of this hour. As we go through tonight's presentation, feel free to, make comments in the chat, ask questions in the chat. We'll entertain those as we go along, so you don't have to save anything to the end. And Cite, I'll ask our host, Cite, and John in charge of Law Society, about the recording. It'll be available later, okay? And they'll share that with you in the chat. I know we will make this recording available on the Law Society YouTube page, right? That's basically what we'll do. Yes. Okay, so you have the link for that, and I think it's shared in every course as well. So you'll be able to access it. Probably be posted very soon, like tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah, I can post it tomorrow morning. No worries.
Thank you, Cite. Yeah. Excellent. All right, so again, my name is Professor Jeff Gulley, and my colleague and I have been teaching here for many years. I'll let Tim tell you a little bit about himself, but I have almost 17 years teaching here and over 20 years teaching at the college level, and 35 plus years working in the legal profession in private practice, as a trial court judge, and teaching. I was a business owner and even owned a legal recruiting firm at one time. So a little bit of varied background I bring to the table. And I teach a lot of courses as well. Some of you have been in some of my classes or will be in the future. And I teach legal research and writing on a regular basis throughout the year. So we're going to get started tonight. I'm going to go ahead and turn my mic and camera off, and Tim's going to start us out. And then again, we'll be kind of volleying back and forth tonight during the presentation. So thank you all for being with us tonight, and we'll just get going. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so like Jeff mentioned, my name is Professor Tim Carlin. I've been teaching here for 14 years. I've worked quite a few years in the public and private practice, worked for a lot of the alphabet soup agencies. And presently, I'm right now teaching legal research and writing, both advanced and just the introductory course. And we're going to be using the, it's not showing up, the Bluebook for today. Next slide. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is, imagine that that's you, and the idea is, okay, you're a legal researcher. What do we need to do? Well, the first job is to research. And so the first questions you need to ask are from the client, what is it that you're doing here? And after you've had a chance to interact with the client, and spoiler alert, many times clients will not share all of the facts. They sometimes will hide things. Things I always tell my students is many times you're meeting a client not at their best. And so just remember that, have some compassion, and just understand that they may not be forthright or forthcoming in sharing some information with you, just because it may not be appealing to them and put them in the best light. So what we need to do is to identify what are the essential facts, summarize those facts, and you can go through and you can see all of those. And the idea behind this is that as a researcher, it's crucial that you have to have both the law and the facts come together, so that when you're preparing your legal, this says legal memo, but any legal communication, you need to be able to synthesize those or bring those together in order to make the arguments for or against whatever issue you are presenting before the court. And so part of that is, you can see the second to last aspect is checking citations. And I know that if you have no idea what the Bluebook is, it's like the APA, but a little more frustrating because it's especially used within the law. And so for those who are aware of what the Blue Book is, it can be a point of concern or frustration. And so there's a whole long list of things that legal researchers do. None of it is super easy. So next slide. All right, so one of the first things that you need to do is just follow the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Understanding who is involved, the parties involved, there could be third parties involved, what are the issues being considered, and that can be, and again, the second bullet point can be one of the most frustrating aspects because some issues will be really open and obvious, others will be hidden behind facts or so secondary or tertiary issues that you're not even aware of that as you do more digging and researching crop up later. Where did the activity take place? You can see, I don't need to read all those to you. It's a very broad process that you need to go through as a researcher. Otherwise, if you don't do a proper job building this foundation, that's what all these aspects are for, to build that foundation of your legal research and then your writing and your fact checking, your citations. And if any of those aspects, any of these listed here aren't firm and established, then the whole thing can just fall down. It's just like building a house. Okay, next slide, please. Now, first thing we need to talk about here is primary sources of law. You always want to begin with these primary sources of law. And so when we say primary, is there something else? And well, obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, we have primary sources of law, which is the law itself. Then we have what are known as secondary sources of law, laws or as sources that help us understand that law. One of the first things that you need to do once you've gotten to, I'm ready to do my legal research, is you need to consider the language that's being used. What are the key words, the terms that you need to implement in your search? You're not just going to sit down and find these out just like, coming into your mind by strokes of genius. If sometimes they will, maybe sometimes they won't, many times they don't. All the research for the key terms comes from hard work and dedication and an eye to details. Now, one of the first things you need to be aware of once you're on your database doing your research is you need to start restricting to jurisdiction. And that goes back to the question from the previous slide. Where did it take place? Is this a federal issue? Is it a state issue? Maybe it's going to be a little bit of both. What type of law is at heart here? Is it a constitutional issue? Are we talking about the First Amendment right or Second Amendment right or so forth? Or are we talking about state statutes or federal statutes? Are we talking about administrative laws and regulations? Are we talking about case law? All of these things go into this consideration of, and if you don't have the answers to these questions, then you're just going to be swimming out in an ocean of information and not really knowing where to find that information. Next slide. All right. Next, when we talk about secondary sources, remember, primary sources is the law itself. Secondary sources are those sources that help us understand the law. Because if you've ever been in a classroom before and your instructor says, hey, let's read this case or let's read this law, and you're like, I see those words individually, I understand them, put them together in a sentence, I have no idea what it's even saying. Well, that's pretty common. And so that's the beauty of secondary sources, those sources that help you sort of interpret and translate the hard verbiage in cases and statutes into a little more plain English. And so we can see encyclopedias, ALRs, you can see the rest there. Legal dictionaries, I'll flop my dictionary. I should have had that ready. This is my Black's Law dictionary. This is like a Webster's dictionary, any other dictionary. It's a book that helps you understand particular words. One of my favorites is an encyclopedia. And it's just like, any old school encyclopedia, Britannica, where my favorite is American Jurisprudence, second series, AmJur, where you just open it up to a particular topic and it will provide a voluminous resource explanation and a bunch of resources for you. So if you don't know where to go or where to begin, a secondary source, like an AmJur encyclopedia, and that will get you started. And the idea is just explore. You can see the second portion of this. Explore, identify sources, case law. And again, that's where these sources are so helpful, is that you're going to find a lot of Primary sources of law included within those secondary sources of law, within the secondary sources of law. Okay. Yeah, that's good. It just, I don't want to, great, Bonnie, great question. So you can find the Black's Law Dictionary within Westlaw. Go to the campus.purdueglobal.edu homepage, go to go to your library, databases, and then under secondary sources. And then it'll have an option for Black's Law Dictionary. It's really, really, really useful. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so some tips. Now, again, I'm sort of using this analogy of doing legal research is like the ocean. If you don't have any sort of guides to like, hey, this is a really good place to go fishing, or you don't have one of those like, I don't know, those radar, it's not radar, but you would know like, oh, there's a bunch of fish here, or you know someone's done it for quite a long time. You're just going to be out in this big ocean of law and not know where to go. So using, as you can see, the first bullet point, using secondary sources is crucial. That will help you narrow down that, the big wide ocean of law, narrow down this particular area in that ocean of law and say, hey, I found a AMJUR, or I found a Black's Law entry under a particular topic that had a source to it, or a case, and I can have a lot of cases, but a source that's going to help me go to an ALR article or a law review article that is more on point. And the idea is you transition from the secondary sources into your primary sources. You've then moved off from this encyclopedia entry that says this is what the law is generally to, hey, now follow this case, click on it, whatever, and you can find this case within your jurisdiction, and that's exactly what you're looking for. And then you're on point, and you're on that trail. Sometimes there are rabbit holes on the trail that you just want to go down and get lost for a while. And that's good. Get lost sometimes in your research, but finding that path, it's not just a straight path. It's very windy, and it can be very narrow at times, and it may not look like a path at all. But and you can see that the last bullet point, double check, alternate terms. One of the tips that I have seen is that when you have you found a case, and then you start doing this alternate searches, and you go down this other path, and it brings you back to that case, or you see a similar case. And the more you research, the more you keep coming back to these cases, these sort of core cases, then you know that you're probably on the right path, assuming that you are on point with the jurisdiction, the law, etc. So the third bullet point I skipped over briefly, annotated versions. To find an annotated version, like of statutes, for example, it's the law itself, primary source of law, but usually somewhere at the bottom included in that are annotations or notes that a publisher says, hey, why don't we put these in? It's not the law itself, it's secondary in nature. It'll help practitioners, you and I, to find what they're looking for, to have more primary sources of law, or additional sources or help, or clarification on confusing aspects. Okay, next slide. Now, I briefly mentioned that before, but again, if you go to the course, there's multiple ways to get to it. I briefly explained going to the campus homepage, but if you're on your course, like within your LS 204, for example, that's the Introduction to Legal Research and Writing course. So you're on your course, you click on content, it'll be upper left-hand side. And on the left-hand side of the page, it'll open up and it'll have a number of options. And you click on Academic Tools, and then it'll have an option within the middle that says Library. You click on that library, a new page will open up in the middle. You scroll down slightly to Westlaw Campus Research, you'll see this little icon, and you're in the right place when you find that. Next slide. And this is, when I said you'll know in your right place, this is what you are looking for. This will bring you to the slot. And so this is your portal to legal research. This is what you're looking for. If you'll notice in the middle, you see it says secondary sources. That's what I'm talking about. Amjur, that encyclopedia, the Black's Letter Law Dictionary. To the left-hand side, you see cases, statutes, regulation, administrative decisions, guidance. Oh, thank you. Those are the primary sources of law. Secondary, that's the law itself, obviously, cases, those are the law. I see Jeff. Thank you, Professor Gulley. You talked about the 4 primary sources of law. That's a nice summary right there for those. Obviously, we're sort of missing Constitution in there, but it'll be under the statute portion. This is what you're looking for when you get to Westlaw, and you're on the right path when you find this. Okay. So next slide, and I'll turn it over to Professor Gulley.
Thank you, Professor Carlin. All right, I'm going to start us on our Bluebook journey tonight. So because I've been doing it so long, even as a college student when I first learned Bluebook citation, because I had a double major in government and paralegal studies, and then I went straight from college to law school. So over 35 years in the legal profession plus college. So Black's Law Dictionary is available in Westlaw as well. So let me just go back a slide quickly. And you click on, it's a secondary source, so click on secondary sources. And then on the next page, you'll see a link for Black's Law Dictionary. I think it's still up in the right, the upper right part of that page. Can't miss it. So the Bluebook is in the 21st edition, probably the 22nd edition will be coming out, I'm guessing within the next year or two. But it is compiled by the editors of the law reviews at several of the Ivy League schools. And it is the standard citation format in the legal profession. So paralegals, attorneys, judges, law clerks, everyone should be familiar with the Bluebook. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Hi, Amber. So, and again, some of you here tonight have had legal research and writing, maybe the first course or maybe the advanced or both. Others have not. So maybe that's coming. For example, I know on my schedule, I'm teaching legal research and writing this next term. So I'm going to be seeing some students for the first time to talk about research and writing in depth, but also Bluebook citation. So let's start with some basic rules. Okay. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight with me and Professor Carlin. So the purpose of a citation is, first of all, to identify the document and the part to which you as the writer is referring. Whatever document, whether it's an internal legal memorandum, whether you're writing a motion, whether you're working on a trial brief, an appellate brief, you have to also give the reader enough information to find the document or the part of it you're referring to. So if they want, you've given the citation, then they can go to Westlaw and pull up the whole statute or the whole case that you've been citing to. And you're going to give them just enough content to decide whether they want to actually go down that road. Paralegals will work on research for attorneys as well, where maybe they just have to do a quick case brief. And the attorney then will then use that to determine whether or not that case or cases will be used in maybe, an opinion letter for a client or motion and supporting memorandum that's being filed with the court. So judges care about citations and how briefs are drafted. I mean, look at this quote. This is from a U.S. District Court judge from the Northern District of Illinois, and this is part of the quote. Plaintiff's complaint could have been drafted in crayon on the back of a napkin. So I don't think the judge thought very much about the plaintiff's pleading, right? The actual complaint. No, you never want to give the impression to any judge, state or federal, that your document has been drafted in crayon. Certainly not literally, and certainly not figuratively. Thank you, Professor Carlin, for answering that question. So citations are important. And remember, just like you're familiar with APA citation, we give credit to our sources, right? We want to maintain academic integrity. We certainly don't want to have any issues with plagiarism, right? So citation is always important, even more so in the legal profession. So as we go forward tonight, I'm going to get into some of the basic rules. Again, you don't have to memorize this, but because the Bluebook literally is a resource. And as Professor Carlin mentioned, now we have it set up so when students enroll in LS 204, you will automatically be sent a physical copy of the Bluebook. And later on, there's a link you can actually, I'll get the link later on the slide that you can go to the website. The official publisher of the Legal Bluebook, you can actually even get an online version if you prefer. So, but as the slide says, for generations, legal professionals have relied upon this unique system of citation in their writing, and it is. There are some similarities to APA, but as we'll explore tonight, it is quite different. So here we go. Black's Law Dictionary defines citation as, and there's the definition. If you go to Westlaw and go to Black's Law Dictionary, you can find that. And this part here, let me get the pen going. Starting here and here and this. That is the actual Bluebook citation. That is the Bluebook citation for how you cite to a word you look up in Black's Law Dictionary. Sometimes the word citation is shortened to the word cite. So you'll see that as well. Again, as you can see there, another difference in APA, when Bluebook citations are provided in text, as I have given it to you there, you see that as an example, that's at the end of a sentence. APA would give an abbreviated format, but the first time you use a Bluebook citation for the first time in text, you have to provide the entire or full citation, and you never put the entire citation in text in parentheses as you would in APA. So that's another notable difference. So types of legal sources, okay? Types of legal sources, and Professor Carlin mentioned some of these. So but I just want to give you an idea of some of the sources we're going to focus on as we go forward and explore the citations. Okay, so we're going to begin with constitutions. Now, when you have your Bluebook, some of you are already doing this, okay? So, and if you haven't, I don't have mine tabbed. Back in the day, as the kids say, I certainly did have some tabs, but over the years, I found I no longer have a need for it. So some of the basic rules, which really haven't changed, addition to addition, it's here, right? It's here. It comes with time, and literally, I can look at a citation and know, what's missing, what should be there, is the comma out of place, should there be a period, should there be a Roman numeral instead of or the section symbol, right? All right. And we're getting page numbers there. Tabs really help. Yes. So Rule 11, and you can see how the citation will give the state or country abbreviation and the abbreviation for Constitution, the section or subdivision you're citing. And there you can see how we cite to both the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, and a citation to a state constitution, Minnesota Constitution, Article 1, Section 13. The abbreviations for geographic terms are also found in the back of the Bluebook, and this will be later on a slide too, just to mention it. But if you're wondering how did I use those citations, you might think, okay, well, U.S. makes sense, but maybe you would have done something else for Minnesota. The abbreviations are listed there in Table T10 for all states and actually a lot of countries around the world, and some cities as well, like good old Philly, right? Arthur, Philadelphia. Excellent. Perfect statute. Perfect example of that, Arthur. So statutes, we know our statutes are the laws that are enacted by the legislative branch of government. Congress, state legislature, depending upon your unit of government. They publish these in books called codes, which is simply a collection of all of the laws, rules, regulations. All right. Thank you. Thank you. We're getting lots of you, or thank you, are sharing page numbers in the Blue Book. That's right. And that's another thing you'll become familiar. You don't have to memorize them because they're there, again, to check it out as a resource. And federal statutes are compiled in the United States Code, USC, or US Code. You'll see it written both ways. And how do we cite statutes? Well, we go to Blue Book Rule 12. Blue Book Rule 12. And you can see the example at the bottom, okay? The title number, the code's abbreviation, the section number of the statute, and the year of the spine of the code volume, not the year the statute became effective. So the example at the bottom of the slide here is 17 U.S. Code, Section 1201, and the current year 2024. So if I were using a current, actual book, maybe I'm in a law library, a physical library, and I pull it off the shelf. Now, if you are using online sources such as Westlaw, there's a special rule for that, 12.3.2. It addresses what the name of the rule is called year of the code. So I talk about this in legal research and writing quite a bit. And when you're in Westlaw, what's great about Westlaw, especially when you're researching statutes, you just click on, there's a link, a blue link that says currentness. And it takes you to the bottom of the page automatically, and it will give you the current information. It's almost always going to be the current year, or if you're early in the year, maybe the year before. At this, especially as it applies to the states, because states, they have different legislative sessions, and when they have those sessions. So another example here, I just have it laid out as a visual for you. You can see volume number. The USC stands for US Code. Section symbol 1201 is your number and the year of the code. And you can see the note on there. Some of you have already learned this in your courses. It is now common for judges and attorneys and paralegals to delete the year of the code when citing to the US Code. And so per the 21st edition, the most current edition of the Blue Book, it is now optional to include the year of the code when citing the US Code. However, remember, it is not optional when you cite to a state statute. That is only for when you cite to the US Code. So you still have to include a proper year of the code when you cite to a state statute. There are different versions of the US Code simply because there's commercial publishers out there. So where possible, you want to cite the official code and not the unofficial codes. The official code is actually published by the US government, by the official printing office. The unofficial versions are from commercial publishers. I have those listed there for you as well. So the United States Code annotated, Professor Carlin mentioned that earlier when he was mentioning the annotated versions available in Westlaw. So there's an example if you're citing to the USCA. So instead of the USC now, which is the official version, we now have the United States Code annotated. And in parentheses, we can refer to West 2024. There's also a different way we can include the year of the code if you want to follow more detailed information for research in a commercial database. Again, that is in Rule 12 as well. What we don't have access to as part of our library here at Purdue Global is LexisNexis. It is also a popular database in the legal profession. Some firms may actually have subscriptions to both. Usually law firms will kind of pick and choose because they are pretty expensive, even though many firms will also bill research time to some extent to clients. but they call it the United States Code Service. So if you see something cited as USCS, like this, okay, with the S there, you know that's going to be the Lexis version of the US code. And you see in the parentheses, we refer to the publisher as well, LexisNexis, and then the year of the code. State statutes, it's going to vary by state, but quite similar. How do we determine the format? What format? And you can see the format here. Minnesota, it's Minnesota stat section symbol, right? Indiana code. Utah code annotated. So where we go to determine our format for citation, we go right to Bluebook Table T1. In the back of the book in Table T1, it's several pages. You will have the citation format for the federal government, for the courts, for statutes, for even agency decisions, but also every single state. So if you go to your state, it will tell you. You find the state. So we would go to Minnesota in the Bluebook in Table T1, and we would then look under that for statutory compilations. And it would tell us that's how you cite to a Minnesota statute in that particular format. The same thing for Indiana. We would go to Table T1, we would go to Indiana, we would scroll down on that page, go down to statutory compilations, and it would tell us that format. Same approach for Utah. Again, not something you're going to memorize, but here's the thing. In the practice of law, most people practice primarily in one jurisdiction. Not everyone. Some people go, some attorneys have a practice where they might go to other states. They may practice in more than one state, but most individuals, paralegals and attorneys in their legal profession are going to practice in one state primarily. So you will become quite familiar with how to cite to state statutes, how to cite your state constitution, how to cite to an appellate court case in your state at the intermediate level or your state high court. Arthur, a question on statutes. When you use a date of decision as opposed to an online commercial database such as Westlaw. Well, Arthur, date of decision, Professor Carlin's going to get us started on talking about citing case law in a moment if you're talking about decisions. But when it comes to the statutes, we can refer to the currentness information that we find in the statute in Westlaw. That you always see a link at the top of the page you're looking at once you find the statute you're researching, and it's just a blue clickable link. You click on the word currentness, it'll take you to the bottom of the page, and it'll give you the information on what is the appropriate year of the code to use. Currency is always important. Absolutely. Okay, and my last slide, and I'm going to turn it back over to Professor Carlin. When it comes to citing administrative regulations, Rule 14. Okay, so first of all, we've talked about Rule 11, constitutions, Rule 12, statutes, Rule 14, administrative regulations, and then Professor Carlin's going to spend a significant amount of time, and then I'll come in later and share some more on Rule 10. Rule 10 is cases. That's right. That's right, Amber. So federal regulations are compiled in this set of books called the Code of Federal Regulations. Updates are found through a list of CFR sections affected. That's the LSA. And the Federal Register. The CFR is available, fully available in Westlaw, and also the Federal Register is as well. The Federal Register is literally a daily publication. Every single day, various agencies of the federal government will promulgate administrative rules and regulations, or they'll actually issue public notices or hearings, or where they're going to have a hearing on a proposed change of a rule. So that's published every single day in the Federal Register. It is a chronological publication, so it's not the best for researching, even though you can still research it fairly easily in Westlaw. If you use certain keywords, you have an idea of the subject matter you're looking for. But once everything is published, it ends up in the CFR, and it's a wonderful publication, easy to research as well. All of the states have similar publications, and every single state's administrative regs are published as well and available fully in Westlaw. When we cite to a federal regulation, there's the Rule 14 citation. So the title number, 47 CFR section symbol, 73.069 is your section number. And you always provide a year, the most current year for that regulation based upon the source you're researching. States have a similar approach under Rule 14. Again, to find out the appropriate citation format, you go to Table T1, you go to the state, and then you look down until you find administrative compilations. It's pretty much always right after the statutory compilation. So again, right there at your fingertips in the Bluebook, not something you have to memorize, but again, if you want to put tabs in your Bluebook, you definitely want to tab those rules for your primary sources, especially if maybe you only want to do 10 and 12 cases and statutes. You will refer to those in the practice of law more so than others. But some people are going to work in a practice that is administrative law heavy. So maybe Rule 14 is good as well. But if I was going to recommend you tabbing I would tab all your 4 rules for your primary sources of law. So with that, that's a nice little segue for me to tag Professor Carlin, who's going to take over and start talking about how to cite the cases.
Thank you, Professor Gulley. Yes, that is a great segue into Rule 10. So we saw Rule 11, Rule 12, Rule 14, and now we're going to talk about case law, court decisions, Rule 10. Next slide, please. So again, we still have our handy dandy Bluebook with us here. And briefly, when we talk about case law, think of like a judge making a decision, the court opinion. It's a case, and they publish those cases, those opinions. So we can talk about, oh, did you research the case? Did you research the opinion? It's all the same thing. It is a court's decision that creates binding or can create binding law depending on the decision. And these are, as you can see here, they're printed. You see the attorney looking at all those different books. They're printed and bound in what are known as law reporters or simply reporters. Next slide. So please keep that in the back of your mind. Reporter means a published, bound set of decisions. We have what are known as official or unofficial. You may be thinking like, well, what makes it official? What makes it unofficial? If it's published by the government entity itself, then it's going to be official. If it's published by some private party, think like Westlaw, LexisNexis, etc., that is going to be the unofficial. It's important to be aware of these. You see the little picture here, Federal Reporter, 3rd series. This is the official. Oh, yes, perfect. Thank you. This is the official reporter. And you can see 432. As you can imagine, there's probably more. And there's at least 432 of those copies or those volumes that you need to research. Doing it old school way, it's really useful because you really get your hands on it. You can see it. But just being able to click online in Westlaw, it's so much faster. Okay, next slide. Now, this is the general format of what the citation will look like. There's really this 3 parts to it. The first part is going to be the party names. Brown v. Board of Education. Now, you can see it says BD dot of EDUC. That goes back to the Bluebook as well. There are going to be abbreviations you need to be aware of. If you go to Bluebook table 6, it's going to give you the common words that need to be abbreviated. And Brown v. dot. Every time the plaintiff, defendant, or petitioner respondent is in there, their names are going to be separated by the V, lowercase v, period, other party names. Yes, thank you, Professor. It is really good to get that. Now notice that the party names are here italicized, and it's choose your own adventure. You want to italicize it, great. If you want to underline it, perfect. Don't do both. As well as notice the comma at the end. is not italicized or underlined. That's the end of the party name. Next, you see 347. Remember that previous page? It said 342, volume 342. That's what it says. Like, hey, you need to go to the 347th volume of the U.S. And that's the official U.S. reporter for the Supreme Court. And then you would, once you have that big old volume in your hand, you'd open it up to page 483. And somewhere on that page will be the beginning of Brown v. Board of Education. And you can see the parenthetical, the parentheses, it has the year of the decision. So you'll know that was decided in 1954. A lot of great information in the Blue Book. The purpose of this, what Professor Gulley and I are doing, is sort of giving you a high-level view of the Blue Book and different things you need to look at. So what I encourage you to do, if you're not in LS 204, you just have questions about this, contact your instructor for the course, and just keep researching, reach out to us. We'll be happy to help. Next slide, please. All right. So we see the U.S. Supreme Court. We talked about U.S. That's the official reporter. Now there are some unofficial reporters. Remember we talked about that, published by private entities, and you can see the Supreme Court reporter S.CT. That is published through Thomson West, and then you have the lawyer's edition. It has its own abbreviation, and that's published through LexisNexis. Why? Because Thomson West and LexisNexis like money, and they realize that they can provide a good service for attorneys, and they can be more responsive. They can provide something a little more quickly than maybe the official reporters can at the end of the year or the end of the publishing cycle. So be aware of that whenever you go to like Westlaw. So now you got that sort of bouncing around your head. When you go to Westlaw, notice towards the top of a Supreme Court case, it'll have, usually the first will be the U.S., the official reporter. Next, it'll have the lawyer's edition. No, I think it's actually the Supreme Court reporter, and then the lawyer's edition third. And it'll be just in straight line at the very top. So now you know what all those crazy little numbers and letters mean. Okay, next slide, please. This is a nice little picture of what a Supreme Court reporter is. It's not something different or special. It's just published by a private entity as opposed to the official report. Next slide. And this is the official, or the lawyer's edition, the unofficial, that's published by LexisNexis. All right, as you can see, 18, 19, 20, 21, that would be the volume number like we had from Brown v. Board of Education. You'd pull that off, and 20th edition, find what page number it's on, and you'd be off and running. Excellent. Thank you, Professor Gulley. Okay, so you can see the lawyer's edition. They have a couple of series now. Second series is going to be the more recent series, but again, it's similar to the official and the other unofficial reporters. Notice the annotated part there. Again, the author or the publisher is trying to give you additional information. Okay, now that I've talked about, you have the official and unofficial unofficial reporters. You might be thinking like, well, why did you just tell us all that? The idea is that there are certain court rules. You can see the first bullet point here. Certain courts will require you to provide what are known as parallel citations. And just sort of give you a bad, sort of object lesson here. You have the official reporter, and then you have the parallel reporter to the unofficial reporter. That would be the U.S. would be an example. Oh, the third bullet point here. Perfect. Morgan v. United States. 304 U.S. 1. That's the official reporter. Separated by a comma. Now you're going to give a parallel citation to the Supreme Court, the unofficial Supreme Court reporter. 58 SCT 773. Since there's a third publication of the lawyer's edition, you separate that by a comma, and you provide now the lawyer's edition, 82 LED 1129, published in 1938. That is what is known as a parallel citation. You're providing the court with the ability to research or to find this case on their own using, in this instance, 3 separate methods. I hope that makes sense. Be aware that you need to understand your local court rules for what they expect with regards to parallel citations. Okay, next slide, please. Now, we've talked about the Supreme Court. We'll sort of like at the very top, right? That's like the court of last resort. It doesn't go any higher than the Supreme Court. And let's bring it down just a bit if we have this sort of pyramid. And now we have what are known as federal reporters. A federal reporter are the case, awesome. The cases that are published for a particular region. And you can see here, this is citing to the Federal Reporter Third Series for the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. And the 4th series started in June of 2021. And you can see this will be, if we would MedRec, if we want to modify that and it was published after, in 2022, then it would be 319 F.4D, whatever page it would be on. And you have to identify what the court is, the deciding court within that parenthetical, within the parentheses. Now you'll notice, if you recall, like, wait a minute, that previous Supreme Court case, it just had the number of the year, right? Now, and this sort of goes as a practitioner, you have more experience, you can just sort of look at citations and understand quickly what it says. So you see the F.3D. This tells you, like, okay, this isn't the Supreme Court, this is a federal reporter, okay, but what court? Because we still need to understand what court it is. So when it's not obvious from the reporter what the court is, the deciding court, you need to provide that abbreviation within that parenthetical just before the year of the publication. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now we see the federal supplement reporter. And you can see the first bullet point, case law reporter containing select opinions from the U.S. district courts. Now, we talked about the Supreme Court, court of last resort. We talked about the federal courts, this is the appellate courts. Now we're talking about the district courts. These are like the courts where you're going to be trying a case, in front of a jury, evidence, etc. Now, these oftentimes what are known as unpublished decisions, where it's not published and in an official reporter. If it is, you're going to see like Potts v. DynCorp, where it'll give you, hey, this is published in the 465th volume of the FSUP second series, Federal Supplement series, and turn to page 1245. And you can see the picture. These are massive books. Again, that parenthetical, that parentheses, in addition to the publication of the year, since we have no idea what where the deciding court was, you need to throw it in there, MD, Alabama. Okay, so that is the general approach for case citations. Party names, Pot v. DynCorp. And now don't forget the italicization or underlining, not both. Volume, reporter, page number, parenthetical, the parentheses. At the bare minimum, you better include the year of the decision. And you need to include the reporter, the abbreviation of the court that's making the decision, not the reporter, the court that's making the decision, if it's not obvious from the reporter. Hopefully I didn't confuse everyone with my slip up there. Okay, next slide, please. Now, we know we got all 50 states, and it'd take us forever to go through and identify each state. So here's a nice little slide here that's going to break it down by every state. Okay, and the District of Columbia. Don't want to forget District of Columbia. So you say, hey, you know what? I live in Connecticut. Great. I'm the Atlantic reporter. What year is the decision of the court's decision? Well, if it's in the 1900s, it's probably going to be, it could just be the Atlantic Reporter, no second series. I don't know what the dates are on those individually. This is where it's important, where Professor Gulley was talking about earlier, like, you don't need to keep all this stuff like, oh no, I got to memorize, the Northwestern Reporter. No, if you practice in Iowa, then you're probably going to just have that memorized and understand it, just be dreaming of this stuff at night. And if you're practicing in Arizona, well, you're going to have the Pacific Reporter in mind. Okay, next slide, please. This is a map, and you can see what the breakdown for each region is. You sort of get an idea. Hey, you know what? Pick your state. I'm here in Montana. Boom, I'm in the Pacific Reporter. It's a really big one. If you're in Texas, well, you get your own, you're not your own, but you get a much fewer than the Pacific Reporter. So just understand that it's based off of geographic region in which it's been published. Oh, awesome. That's perfect. The eastern states, they sort of cram them in there a little bit more, but so understand that that's how it's going to unfold for everyone. All right, next slide. Thank you. Here are some citation examples for state cases. I know I've been talking about the federal, so what does state look like? We're just going to use Minnesota and Indiana. Again, party name. Finish it off with a comma. Don't underline or italicize the comma, just the party names. Volume, reporter, page number, the parentheses, the parenthetical. At a bare minimum, you need to identify the year of the decision. And you can see in the first one for Minnesota, like Northwest Second Series Reporter. Oh, what? We just saw the map. Like what? That's a pretty big region. Like which state are we talking about? Oh, Minnesota. Indiana, again, we can see the Northeastern Second Series, volume 985, page 731. Well, what state that going to be in? We see City of Fort Wayne. We don't want to guess, though. It's Indiana. And so we're going to see that's the Indiana Supreme Court. All right, next slide, please. I mentioned this before. Don't make that mistake. It is not VS dot. I mean, I know sports fans out there be like, oh, just easy to little creep that in. Don't. It's not a capital V. It's a lowercase v. Again, lowercase v dot. That's it. That's going to be separating the parties, plaintiffs, defendants, but petitioner, respondent. Not Beaver Victory. Yes, Professor Gulley. Next slide, please. 10.2, we sort of talked about this before briefly, but you want to provide the party names italicized or underlined. Don't give first names unless it's the name of corporation. You see John Smith Inc. as opposed to just Smith v. Jones or Baker v. John Smith Inc. Those are the only times you're actually going to be including the first names if it's a corporation. Otherwise, last names only. Think of like Brown v. Board of Education. Brown, that was the last name. Next slide, please. Dates, I talked about this before. Again, year of the decision. If it's an unpublished decision, we talked about that briefly, it gets a little more confusing. You need to go to Rule 10.8.1, and you need to provide quite a bit of information that normally wouldn't be there because in an official reporter, or it's actually been in published reporter, it's going to be the volume and the reporter itself. Unpublished, you're going to need to provide this information. And what does that look like? Westlaw. That'll be all this information will be included Westlaw. That's why you can see in the Castro v. City of Chicago, and that's number. That's going to be the number of the case and year of the decision, Westlaw, and then that's the case decision at asterisk 4. That's the page number it's going to be in. Parenthetical. It'll look somewhat similar. It's just you need to include a little bit more information, but it'll be open and obvious for you on that Westlaw page that many of you are probably going to be using. Next slide, please. United States. So for brevity's sake, looking at the clock here, United States. When it's a party, you want to write out United States. Don't make, don't like, I'm going to say some space, just put US. Nope, don't put United States of America. United States is never abbreviated. That's an example, Church Scientology case 92. United States, boom. Table 10, you can find other abbreviations if there's going to be certain words that you need to abbreviate. But United, you will never abbreviate. States, you never abbreviate when it's the party, when the government is a party to that case. Next slide, please. And short form citations. Professor Gulley had talked about that before. The very first time you provide that the citation, that is going to be the full citation. Following that, what we refer to as short citations, in which you can say, hey, id, right? Look at the previous citation. Or if you have another citation in the middle of there, id at this page number that you need to go to. If it's a different page number, I apologize. You can see 769, that original citation. Well, now you need to go to the same previous citation, but now go to this different page. Next slide, please.
You want me to take over now, Tim?
Oh, yes, I apologize.
That's all right. That's okay. No worry. No worries. You're on a roll, and we just have about 8 or 9 slides left. So id, you're going to become familiar with id. Some of you are already familiar with it. It's, of course, more Latin. It's from the Latin word idem, meaning the same, but instead of writing item, we're going to save some keystrokes. Instead of 4, we're going to go with 2 plus a period, so 3, right? So Bluebook has a whole rule on it. Bluebook Rule 4, as mentioned on the previous slide, discusses short form citations, but then Rule 4.1 specifically discusses id and when to use it. It follows the previous cite in a consecutive citation. And then if there is a citation but on a different page, you can see the examples here as well at the bottom. And it is always in italics, always in italics. If you are doing a short citation form for a non-consecutive citation, so let's say you're writing and you're in your memorandum, you're writing, you've cited to 2 cases, a statute, and now you want to refer back to the first case you discussed, but you can't use id because you've already talked about 2 other sources. If you use id, you're referring back to your most recent source, which was a statute in my example. So first of all, the first time you reference your citation, you see there the long citation. That's the first time you reference the case. Later on, if you're doing a short citation non-consecutively, so there's other intervening sources, instead of id, you could see, so let's say you have content from the case. I included the same quoted content, but let's say you're discussing something different, you can just use part of the case name, Katz, comma, 375 US at 82. You can point the reader to the particular page number. And that is called a pinpoint citation, when we are calling the reader's attention to a specific page number, right? So the pinpoint citation, that's opposed to the page where it begins. So you see the case citation here. Second bullet point, the number 217 refers to the page number in the pinpoint citation for Baker v. Carr, 369 US 186, 217. So 186 is the first page of Baker v. Carr, and you're referring the reader to page 217. So it's very important to give a pinpoint cite. My example there is a case from 2003, McConnell versus FEC, is good for an example. It's really not good. It's pretty much overruled by Citizens United. It is 300 pages in length, and I try to find a quote in that page without a pinpoint cite for the reader. So pinpoint citations, definitely very helpful. Abbreviations and case names, we referred to this earlier. I told you we had it on a slide. So Bluebook Table T6, also, and some examples, association. It's not us. Some of them are a little different. Most of them are going to end in a period. Association, ASS apostrophe. So you're going to see apostrophes like in the word government down here. Committee, corporation, university, some examples. Also, for if you do not have the Bluebook available, Cornell's website has various sources available. And in fact, that link actually takes you to Cornell's site where they have their version of Table T6. And other abbreviation tables, Table T7, if you want to know how to abbreviate certain courts, like a probate court. That's how you abbreviate it, according to Table T7. Geographic terms, I mentioned earlier, Table T10. Minnesota, okay, M-I-N-N, not mini, not M-N. Indiana, not I-N, I-N-D period. So it is different than the typical abbreviation we're familiar with when it comes to the U.S. Postal Service, right? And then you'll find other cities as well, like Arthur earlier mentioned Philadelphia as an example. Institutional names and periodicals are found in Table T13. So that may be not something you use frequently, depending on what kind of research you're doing. But for example, how you abbreviate the American Bar Association, it, you'd probably guessed that as ABA. However, if a journalist was writing an article about the ABA, they probably do just ABA. But Bluebook says if you're citing to it, you better put a period after every letter, right? So very, very specific there. That's what Bluebook is all about. Details for the details. So secondary sources, law review articles, and again, we'll go into more of this if you in your legal research and writing classes. So, you know, I'm going to try to keep us to, we just hit top of the hour. So some examples there, but you see the example there for citing this article, and it's different than APA. So you see the full name of the authors, first name first, and then the title of the article in italics, and then the actual volume, journal, abbreviation, page number, and year of publication. Other wonderful secondary sources, one of my favorites in Westlaw. All of these are available in Westlaw. All of the law review articles for every law school in the country, and some national publications as well. I love American Jurisprudence Second. It's a wonderful legal encyclopedia, as is CJS, Corpus Juris Secundum. But I'm an AmJur fan, have been for a long time. And you cite it according to Rule 15A. Another wonderful secondary source to use in research, the American Law Reports. ALRs are cited based on Rule 16.7.6. And there's that example for you as well. Author's name, the word annotation, full name of the title of the article in italics, and then the actual publication, volume, publication name, page number, and year. Newspaper articles, there's a special rule for that, you might imagine. And basically, here's an example of a citation to an article found in the New York Times. So it's pretty easy to cite to a newspaper article. Internet sources, different ways depending upon how you cite this, if you have a date in the article or if you do not. So one example there in the fourth bullet point, right below that, you see an example where the article does contain a date. If no date is listed, you provide the citation information, and the very last part of it in parentheses, you actually put the date you last visited that. Like, you know, this past Sunday, St. Patrick's Day. And our final slide tonight as we wrap up. So some online sources, lots of examples. There's the official Bluebook site as well. The Cornell's wonderful. The Georgetown Law Library is wonderful as well. All right, so we're going to wrap up. Oh, the in Ray, Arthur, in Ray, and Supra, everything again, Rule 4. It probably, to go into more a detailed explanation, would probably take us another 10 minutes or so. But again, those will be used from time to time in case citations, Rule 10 for in Ray as well. What's wonderful about, not always you'll find that in Westlaw, but you will find it there's an example. You'll actually have it, but in Rule 10, the in Ray part is listed there as well. And yeah, final questions and comments. Alexa, the recording is going to be Professor Tarhan's going to post the recording on the YouTube page, so you can go back and watch it all again as well. And so if you have, I guess, Professor Tarhan indicated that will be available tomorrow. Okay. Right. So thank you all for being here tonight. We appreciate your time and your attention, and hopefully you took away some new knowledge. And I know you're all big Bluebook fans. The Purdue, the PG Legal Studies YouTube page. That's right. Our YouTube channel, Professor Tarhan said, yes. Thank you for the kind words there, Amber. All right. Wonderful. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.